made an app with some friends that did very well. I helped run a little bit of a mini dev agency and did some coding there. I went to a lot of hackathons, and I actually just applied on jobs.apple.com. And the way it works at Apple is, you can pick the job that you apply for, compared to, like a generic rec that you would get from say Meta. And the one that I picked happened to be a good one based on what I know now. As was mentioned, originally I started in automation on the watchOS side. And as it pertains to scalability, that might be a valuable perspective on the type of stuff my organization did and maybe why it was scalable. I can't. I'll preface by saying I can only say so much. There's an NDA that I signed, and I don't think anyone's like gonna hunt me down. But Apple has a fairly serious culture around secrecy. But yeah, I was in test infrastructure, specifically on watchOS. It's really important that your watch and your phone can pair. There's a whole team dedicated to that was shared between the watchOS and the software engineering orgs. The way it works in Apple is like those new projects like watchOS, they actually get their own separate division, and they kind of run like a mini startup. So it's cool to be a part of that, see how that operated. And I was on the supply side of the automated testing, and the sheer number of tests that we generated is really what made the organization need to utilize scalable systems. So for watchOS pairing, we would run for that particular component on the integration testing side alone on the order of thousands of tests a day. And these are very high level tests that run at the UI, that use physical devices. You could imagine folks running their unit tests would increase that by an order of magnitude. So originally started doing that. Made my way more into the machine learning side. This may be of interest to some of you all. Is once you get your foot in the door, you can move. So being on that supply side, managing the execution and the triage of all of those tests, I saw a lot of opportunities to utilize machine learning to understand those results better. And I had a successful hackathon project inside Apple that went well enough that I was able to fully transition to working on that full time, basically machine learning tools in support of test infrastructure. I think that's also important context for my perspective on scalability, because when I started in the automation side, like I said, 2016, that it was a growing organization, utilizing still even then like some scalable systems. Like we had some stream processing going with Apache Storm back at the time. And we had a relational Postgres database, back then, running the test results. And kind of as I was making that pivot, things were growing, scalability was happening. But my perspective on it was I was like doing the fun machine learning stuff, which was a little bit of a greenfield project, more on the prototype side, but still plugging into the increasingly scalable systems that were being migrated, transitioned, stood up as things grew. That's probably from a scalability perspective, the most, that part of my story. I also got to work on culture change around software quality. And then obviously I left for startups. I do fractional CTO consulting now. And for the most part, I'm not concerned with highly scalable systems. I like doing that greenfield stuff anyways, but that's my Apple story for the most part.
All right. So thanks, Jake, eventually sharing your valuable insight on that part, eventually what you have done in the background. So it will assist the attendees to know you better. So guys, if you get aware about, like Jake has already worked with Apple, so probably in the next 30-40 minutes, we'll be majorly grilling around what his work eventually at Apple looks like in terms of scalability, I would say. Then probably we can also ask, since Jake has been actively working in the domain of machine learnings and the new technologies, specifically I would say the emerging technologies. So in that category also we'll just draw down. So to all the attendees, the format gonna look like something like that. For next 30 minutes, I have some pre-filled questions for Jake. I'll definitely going to ask them, and probably which can assist with the multiple queries that you might have. At the end of it, probably we'll be opening up the Q&As as well. So don't go anywhere. keep your posting your questions on the Q&A section. We'll definitely gonna take it up. So on that note, Jake, I would like to take your permission to start.
Yeah.
All right, man. So Jake, I'll just talk initially about the Apple days that you have spent uh, at the organization. So how does your typical day at Apple looks like when you are working for them?
Yeah, I was shared some of these questions ahead of time, and I thought about this one because it kind of evolved obviously over time. So when you get your foot in the door, I feel like more likely than not you're gonna be doing some of the grunt work that people want to do less. That's just how it goes. I think in any group you might be joining.
Mhm.
And so in those early days, like I said, it was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember what it looked like exactly, but like I would come in and the test results would be either completed or in the process of finishing. And on a daily basis, I guess for context, at Apple they build a new version of
Mhm.
iOS, watchOS, tvOS, and macOS on a nightly basis. There's a nightly build the entire operating system, and that was our job, was to make sure that when the new watchOS and iOS came out, those phones and watches could pair, because if they can't, nobody can do their job, in the watch building that day,
Right.
if can't pair their watch, right? So the first part of it would be looking at those test results, and that was where I very quickly said we need to machine learning this thing, because there was a lot of data to manage, and it was not being done when I came in the most optimal way. So that would probably be the bulk of the morning. In the earlier phases was just like sorting through test results, and then if something major had broken, you know, pursuing that bug and getting it to the right people, because all we see at the UI level is pairing failed. Like I used to have all these dialogues memorized. I don't remember them anymore, but let's say there's a particular one that indicates usually that there was a Bluetooth crash or something. I forget what the dialogue said, but I'd be like, okay, I know the guy, like I'm going to send it to him. Like, hey, we saw that, 25% of our pairing tests are failing with this dialogue. This is what the logs say, fix your stuff, and going from there. Otherwise, though, it would be writing code. And fortunately, I did get to write more code than tests, even at that phase in my career. The pairing tests would only need to get updated as the pairing UI changed. And so it was mostly just like, how can we figure out how to wrangle this data better, and then how can we, I guess basically that. But like, for example, even in those days, I mentioned there was Apache Storm, we would be like writing components for the stream processing pipeline to basically, as these test results come in, add some various flavors of analysis to them. That was in the earlier days. As things went on, I got a lot more flexibility and a lot less of that urgency, where it's like, we need to get these bugs solved this morning so people can do their job. It would be more so like, come in and work on what I'm working on. Go to some meetings, especially working in Apple Park. It was pretty sweet. Long walk into that building. You get some cold brew at the cafe, and then sit down at your desk, sit down at whatever. There's lots of little nooks and crannies to work inside Apple Park. Sometimes to work at my desk in the morning. Sometimes I'd work, at the third floor cafe in the evening or outside. It was pretty cool, honestly.
All right, all right. That's amazing to hear that, Jake. Eventually, you have started off probably what eventually on the work side it looks like to work at Apple, and then obviously about the perk side. So we'll just go a bit deep down on the work side for now. So on that part, I have a small question for the audience. So I would like to ask audience, so which are the Apple products that you used to use on your daily life? If you can just quit out, it's actually relevant for Jake also. Jake, you can also answer that question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm on my iPad Pro right now. This is a nifty little guy, and then I got my Mac for working, multiple iPads. I'm not wearing my watch, I guess, but big fan of the Apple Watch, especially. as a standalone cellular device. It's cool that you can leave your phone at home. And then yeah, I've got two home pods. When I left Apple, I think I cleared out all my discounts. And I probably spent like $5,000 or $6,000 just getting all new Apple stuff. Now that's held me over for all this time.
Yeah, yeah. So eventually, Jake, on that note itself, I would like to just ask you the question, though you have already answered that, but again, I'll ask. So, which Apple product are you most proud of contributing to?
Yeah, I remember this question as well. Well, like I said, in terms of like direct contributions to a particular Apple product, in my earlier days, obviously I worked directly on the watch, and it was cool. I think especially plugging in with the watch team and seeing the folks that build it, and like kind of the passion and the energy and the vision for what it was going to be, really made me a strong advocate for the watch, and I still use it a lot to this day. But as my role evolved throughout Apple, working on test infrastructure, you support all of the Apple products, especially in software engineering. So I would say in terms of direct contributions, I actually did contribute to the operating system a handful of times. I got to work with what they call the Core OS team on some like very low level code. But yeah, tiny little slice of code I wrote might be running on your iPhone. But for the most part, I worked on tools, which for additional context, actually, like, it's not the worst place to be. It's very cool to be able to say, like, say you're on the iMessage team, like, yeah, that's my code, and you're texting people with blue bubbles. But you get, like, if you have an idea for iMessage, you have to convince so many people to buy in, to make that idea happen. And it's a slow process. It's a complicated process versus if you're working on internal tools, like, I have an idea, I'm just going to code it. My boss is like, oh, that's cool. We should ship that tomorrow, So it's like a little bit more of like a startup-y, agile, flexible context. And you still influence Apple. So don't sleep on tools.
All right, Jake. So thanks for sharing your insight on that side too. So on that note, Jake, I would like to put up a common question, probably. So the question is like that: what do you think? What are some common technical pitfalls which I would say a scalable the engineer who is working on scalability should avoid when he or she is going to scale a product? So what are the common pitfall he or she should avoid?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Having observed it at Apple, the things that we learn going through this scalable systems curriculum are very important tools, but they are kind of, you're basically getting interviewed on the destination of where systems ended up after many, many years of evolution. So, I think we preach this in most of the classes, to start your startup with a highly scalable design from the beginning is almost never a good idea. I forget, there's a law that someone put it that's basically like a complicated system won't work unless it evolved from a simple system. So I think the most important thing as you're scaling a system is, start with the simplest thing that will handle whatever load you're experiencing currently, and then make informed decisions based on the data that you have about, what improvements you should make next. Because that's what my team did. It was not like there was a point where they said, we're not scalable and we're going to be scalable. It was more like, okay, our Postgres database is having performance issues, and we're not getting the right throughput that we need. We're having outages, things like that. We're going to need to move to what ended up being a NoSQL database with higher write throughput. And it came with trade-offs too, right? Like, that wouldn't have been the right move from the beginning, because a lot of people were mad about that, myself included, being on that triage team. When we had that relational database, it was very easy for us to query that system and get all sorts of good insights. And after that migration was done, I think there was some replication back to that original database that was maintained, but for the most part, the performance of that just steadily degraded as the new database came up, and that's just something that now you got to run a Spark job if you want to do like a custom query, where the data is not written in a way to facilitate that query naturally. So I would say have an iterative and smart approach would be my biggest guidance.
All right, Jake. So just to sum it up, so someone should start with a simpler system, probably which can assist or probably handle the current traffic or probably the number of queries that they are getting up. Then they should plan the next level of it. Is it what you are trying to mention?
Yeah, exactly. Like whatever problems you're having, try to look ahead, right? If you've got data in front of you, where is it trending? Like, what is the next problem that you're going to have? Perhaps look to other companies that have done similar things and seen what problems they ran into. I got an email, I think either this morning or yesterday, like scaling Chat GPT. I think it was like the Pragmatic Engineer. Big plug for them. They're not paying me to say this. I just saw that and I was like, I'm going to go read that, because I'm sure they're having all sorts of problems that perhaps have only been seen, they are seeing for the first time, scaling that sort of product to that sort of audience. So learning from, others as well.
All right, all right. So people should also learn from others as well. Rightly mentioned, man. So on that part, Jake, since we all know now you have been working on the emergent technology side, specifically relevant to machine learning and all. So on that side, I have a small question for you. So, what emerging technologies like AI, ML, or maybe blockchain do you see impacting scalability, particularly in future? How they are impacting scalability in future?
Yeah, it's a good question for sure. I saw these, but I didn't get to put a massive amount of thought into all of them. I think there's a lot of machine learning going on the log analysis side for security. A lot of startups in that space just trying to detect anomalies and proactively notify the right folks and respond to them. And I think as these systems get better, I've spent a lot of time on the machine learning side working with text-based log data. It's really extremely valuable information, and as software engineers yourselves, something to take away is like write good logs. One, because you might need them later when you've got some critical bug and you don't know what's going on, and all you have, in the case of Apple, is a misdiagnosis from a customer. It's important to have good logs. But then, these machine learning systems can read the logs too, which means, the better logs you write as a human, the better they can interpret them and learn. I think, Netflix has done interesting stuff with the chaos monkey and designing a system that that kind of that that harms itself and then self heals.
Mm.
That would be an area that I might be interested in, because like learning, I guess, maybe how to self heal, how to recognize issues, and how to address them proactively based on, like, let's say their historical data, running those chaos monkey experiments. It's another thing where I would say, like, as AI improves, perhaps it could help there as well.
All right. So, Jake, you have rightly mentioned about the implementation of ML and AI could assist. So, how eventually Netflix is also getting used to of building up a system which can harm and heal itself. On that note, to my audience, I am just quickly starting a small poll, which eventually will take not more than 20 seconds, I would say. So, do attempt it at once.
See this poll too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I suspect everybody's going to say AI. Personally, I don't want to skew the poll, but I'm bullish on blockchain. I believe that the current state of the casino and speculation will be overtaken by practical applications that use blockchains as computers. IoT too, but that one's been around for a little while. I think all these trends are just very slow to progress, which is natural. But AI lately has not been is reflected by the results we see streaming in. Y'all can't see them, but
Yep, absolutely. I agree, Ben. So right now, what's happening is AI and ML. They are eventually on trend, and I would say somewhat buzzy, but not fully, but somewhat they are buzzy as well. So that's where majority of the audience who are working on these domain, they are inclined towards AI.
yeah, I don't think I saw quantum computing on there either. That's one that's I could imagine becoming trendy very rapidly as that technology evolves. And on the topic of Apple, they just released an iMessage update today that's quantum hard. People are already thinking about that particular technology evolving. So keep an eye there.
Sure. So, all right, Jake. On that part, one more question I would like to put up. So now we have talked about how these emerging technologies will be going to assist or impact the scaling of the system. So let's say I'll just turn around the tables. So let's say as a learner, how should I plan my journey so that I can use those technologies when I'll be going to scale my system in an efficient way?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, my advice as a learner, most broadly, is always to follow what you're interested in. So I would say like whatever component of any of those particular technologies, especially if you're hopefully if you're pursuing scalable systems, you're interested in scalable systems for one. I would say like if you're in the business of pursuing a career that doesn't interest you, you should reconsider that. But there's lots of interesting stuff in this field, and so you certainly shouldn't shy away from it. And I would take that exact same approach, honestly, to whatever subdomains there are. Is just where start reading up on whichever one of those, let's say, is most interesting, and just check out what's the state of the art. Usually, it's going to come from research papers if you want to see how an emerging technology is doing. I think like someone has expressed that if you're reading about some new thing on Reddit, you're early. And I forget what the other one is. I think it was like the news or like Facebook or Instagram, right? Like if you're hearing about it there, you're late. So you need to pursue being on the early side of that spectrum and really just dig into the communities that exist in all of those fields. But I would say, to address this question more specifically, you should also have a foundational level of knowledge in any of those areas. I would say all of them, but especially machine learning. I know IK, I think, I don't know to what extent these curriculums overlap, has some courses that do cover the foundations of machine learning, because I think any engineer right now needs to know at least the basics of it, scalability wise or not.
All right, Jake. So, Jake, we do have a couple of interesting question in Q&A. By then, I would also advise the other attendees to post their question in the Q&A box. Until then, they are doing that. So right now, we have spoken about how the emergent technology can be used while we are going to scale a system, and probably for the people how they can do it in terms of upskilling themselves and then scaling a system. Let's go a bit deeper side on that part as well. So let's say if there is a candidate who is preparing for their interviews
Yeah.
on scalability. So first of all, let's say if I am preparing for an interview on scalability, what are eventually my go-to step I should follow, Jake, being as an IKS alum? If you can highlight few things on that part.
For interview preparation, you mean, for scalable
Yes.
systems?
Yes.
Oh God, I guess that I'm actually not familiar as an instructor to what extent students. I have to assume they all have ongoing access to the IK curriculum, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just fantastic. Especially preparing for a scalable systems interview, make sure that you have that system design flow that we harp in every single lecture fully memorized, and then just get practice doing it. I teaching the SS2 test, get to see students presenting their solutions pretty frequently, and oftentimes it's less about what you say and more about how you say it. So I would say it's very hard to overstate the importance of mock interview practice, and especially feedback on what you've done from someone who can give you good feedback is totally invaluable. Then I would also probably say you need to keep up with the latest developments in a loose sense. I probably wouldn't go rushing to study some new machine learning because you're afraid that you're going to get grilled about it in a scalable systems interview context. I would say that for the most part, interviewers are looking to assess your communication style and your foundational knowledge, and the foundational knowledge evolves so slowly that any learnings that you do about the state of things are kind of like letting yourself get some brownie points. If you go read that blog post like scaling Chat GPT, there might be some good nuggets to loop in for conversation just to kind of show like, hey, I'm hip to the new things. Like that might be good. But before doing that, review the IK curriculum, ensure your foundations are solid in addition to the mock interview practice.
All right. Perfect, Jake. So on that side, I would also completely agree with you because mock interviews are the real savior for us. So whosoever is preparing for their next round of interviews. So on that note, I would like to put up few of the question which the attendees has put it up. So first question I would like to hear from, just a second. I'm just making it live. All right. So Tamer is mentioning, I would like to hear more about his opinion on practical implementations of blockchain, as I thought the technology was largely dead. So first of all, on the second part, what do you think, Jake? Like, does the technology is dead?
Yeah, I think it's certainly not dead. A lot of people associate blockchain directly with cryptocurrency, where cryptocurrency, in my opinion, is only the first use case that will probably see popular use for blockchain technology. And what it really enables is the ability to have like an auditable and immutable ledger of things that have happened and things that have changed hands. And it's kind of like a computing primitive, where you can think of it as a tool. There's this thing that like you can just objectively say like it represents a thing that we couldn't do before that we now can, and how it will be used and see broad adoption is certainly going to depend on what people choose to do with it. But like one that I personally would like to see, and it'll be challenging. I think for them to bootstrap this, mainly just because social networks are so hard. But there's a project I follow called the Lens Protocol, which is attempting to solve the problem of social networks in a blockchain context, where basically, I think I might have my email pulled up. Some of you guys are following me on LinkedIn, right? If LinkedIn ever shuts down, or if LinkedIn says they don't like me, I lose any of you all that are following me. LinkedIn is my largest audience, and there's nothing I can do about that. And if I go from LinkedIn to Instagram to Facebook, there's no interface that allows me to take those followers with me. Whereas with the Lens protocol, you can have your social connections, you can have your social media, you can have everything stored on a system that will exist as long as the link, as long as the blockchain exists, or there's perceived societal value in carrying over the information that was on a previous blockchain. If, let's say, we move to a new one that's interoperable, you can take it to any social network. Anyone can view it. It's yours. It's not Facebook's. there's that's one in particular that I've had my eyes on, but it's been in beta for quite some time. And I think the user experience for onboarding to Web3 is quite bad. You need a wallet. You need to understand all of these things most people aren't going to bother with. So I think those problems are going to have to get solved before that sort of thing sees traction. But it's on my radar for sure.
All right. So I think, Tamur, it answers your question. If you have any follow-up question, you feel free to pose that too. On that note, Jake, I would like to take a question from Shrikant. So Shrikant is eventually asking more on the side of automation. So to be very clear, his actual question is like that. So talking about the uses of ML, are the test cases created using the ML, or we are just analyzing the results? Want to know how ML played a role in testing specifically in detail?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. So I'm pretty opinionated about testing, and the roles that I progressed through on my testing at Apple kind of reflect how my opinions have changed. So I started, babysitting a massive suite of high level integration tests, and felt the pain associated with those sorts of tests, which is, as I earlier mentioned, right? We see a dialogue pop up that says some generic error, and now we have to route that to one of several thousand teams that might be responsible. It's fewer than that in some cases, but it's a difficult problem of determining why a UI test failed. It may have failed due to something that you can't even reproduce reliably. So higher level tests, give you a higher degree of confidence that the overall system works. So they're very important. But they also have a cost associated with them with respect to maintainability and flakiness, and the ability to, like I said, actually understand the root cause. So in terms of the machine learning work that I did on testing, it was about analyzing the results. It was about, how can we take a suite of integration tests that are giving us like log output, and figure out, what went wrong better. In short, like I said, I can't reveal Apple's intellectual property and what I built specifically, even though it was really cool. But as things evolved, I became a larger and larger fan of smaller tests. Specifically unit tests. And so as I got the opportunity to work on software quality, I was able to advocate for increasing use of those throughout software engineering at Apple, because there and in a lot of other places throughout the industry, I think these tests are not super thoroughly used. So in my opinion, rather than investing in machine learning to like automatically generate tests, or investing in machine learning to understand failures from integration tests, it's really better to change your practice as a developer to write smaller tests alongside your code, and to learn how to do effective testing, which is something that you don't do in school. And especially now with the advent of large language models, one, they can help you write the tests, even though because most software engineers, in my opinion, aren't great at writing tests. ChatGPT has learned from the code bases on the internet. ChatGPT is not the best at writing tests either. I don't like ChatGPT's default tests that it suggests. But once you have a test suite, it makes it so much easier for you to, let's say you want to do some crazy stuff with ChatGPT, like take this file and refactor it for readability, or add some new feature, or do something where you have to have a high level of confidence in the AI that it's not going to break the rest of your code. Tests are very important to enable you to do that. So I see, as tests and machine learning come together, rather than machine learning generating the tests, I think that the tests are going to become an increasingly important way to keep the machine learning in check, because those systems are inherently unpredictable.
All right, Jake. So I think Srikant, it answered your question. On that part, I would like to take a very small question from Mukund. So Mukund is asking, did Jake taught the course on scalability testing in IK?
Yeah, I actually wasn't sure what was meant by that question, because you could be referring to my IK class, which was, yes, I taught. I used to teach, I believe, what is now Scalable Systems 3
Right.
on Sunday, but on the instructor side, those 6-hour classes are a lot. So I phased out of that, and now I'm actively teaching the Scalable Systems 2 times test for Yelp, which is fairly regularly on Thursdays. Depends on how many of you all are signed up. And I'm also exploring getting into the machine learning curriculum on the switch up side for IK as well, just because that's an interest of mine. So that's a work in progress.
Yep. So yeah, Mukund, Jake was taking the classes on scalability testing. Apart from that, as Jake has mentioned on the switch up side, so switch up is eventually a program where it is assisting people to shift into the AI and ML domain. So let's say if you are completely a newbie or you have a career small amount of experience, so you can join that program. Jake is one of the instructor over there. So if you have such queries, reach out to operations at the rate interviewkickstart.com. They'll assist you with the right SSAs and they'll be taking up your queries on that part. Coming back to the Q&A part, Jake. So we have a question from Sanjay. Do you see monetizations in verticals where AI and ML has ROI? Also, there is a bias on age on any uptrend on hiring.
Any monetization in verticals where AI ML has ROI? A bit of a broad question. My jerk reaction interpretation of that is perhaps the common skepticism of the Chat GPT wrappers, which I think is fair, and I've got a lot of experience working with those types of companies, and I would say I'm bullish on that sort of tool as well. Especially in the legal domain. Like I said, one of my clients is eSummary doing deposition analysis for lawyers. And there's a whole category of experiences that you can build on top of language models that involve very specific UI, very specific maintenance of context and consultation of external resources, and the sorts of things that OpenAI is probably never going to build because there's just too many niches for them to tackle. So some folks hold the opinion that if you're building a Chat GPT wrapper, your startup is vaporware, just like blockchain. I'm an optimist generally, by the way. I think you would be much better served to approach any new technology with optimism versus the surprisingly common pessimism, because people love to just not like new things. So I would say lots of domains in that space. The other question was what uptrends in hiring. I'm plugged into some fractional CTO circles. There's been some rumblings that things have been moving up. I recently hired an engineer for one of my clients. This was a couple of months ago, and there was still a quite a large pool of applicants. But what I will say though is I think the competition is stiffest for those entry level jobs. There's a lot of candidates that I sifted through that just weren't really what we were looking for, and only a handful that we were really excited about. So I think this goes with any career. The getting your foot in the door is always going to be the hardest, but I think you'll be fine once you do in software engineering. And actually, I hold the opinion more broadly. Like I said, I'm an optimist. I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually found ourselves in a pretty significant talent shortage in software engineering as well. And the reason I say that is twofold. One is we've got the AI boom happening, generative AI. Everyone thinks that ChatGPT is going to take all of the software engineer jobs. I think that's absolutely not going to happen until it takes everyone else's jobs too. And the reason that I say that is, so many people are working on new software, myself included, enabled by the productivity gains from these language models. And every single piece of new software I've written using a language model, just the nature of new software projects is that the AI doesn't know how to do this because no one's done it before. So you can have ChatGPT build you a Reddit clone, and you'll see those scary things like, look at this, ChatGPT builds Reddit. A guy who never knew how to code built Reddit, in a weekend, and it's like great, but like ChatGPT doesn't know how to build a ChatGPT
Right.
wrapper.
So,
And then
Jake, also, there is a
what if
small.
two? Because there were 2 points. That was the first one. The first one
Yeah.
was everyone's scared about the AI. The second one is also the tech layoffs. Everyone overhired in response to low interest rates, and then tons of people got laid off. And so, like those two together, I think makes it so that almost no one wants to get into coding right now. But with that AI boom and everyone working on these new software projects and building new things, eventually some of those are going to turn into companies. Eventually, those people who got laid off are going to start companies. That's how the cycle goes. But I don't know that I've seen the cycle play out this way before, where there's normally a bust and a lot of people start companies, but I haven't seen this level of pessimism about software engineering yet in my career. And if that pessimism turns out to be wrong, there could be a shortage here. And I don't know how many years, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, but I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. Also, Sanjay was mentioning one more point in that part, that it was regarding is there any bias in terms of hiring on ages, on the terms of age
Oh,
as well?
yeah. That's a good question. Like, I don't know that I have enough data to answer that. I feel like I have seen it reflected that a lot of these tech companies, they like to hire folks like me out of school, just because I think there's more candidates available in that pool, and they tend to cost less.
Yes.
I think I wouldn't say that there's a bias against older people. I feel like it's just that as you get older, you need to get better, and you need to have such a significant leg up that someone wants to hire you over this entry level person that might cost less. And that's probably all I can say. I don't have firsthand data on whether there's age bias or not, but I've heard of it.
All right. Jake, next question is from Sahi. Sahi is eventually asking you a personal question. So that is totally relevant to your professional journey, I would say. So the question is like that: can you speak more about the path or journey that took to build the expertise at which you are?
Yeah, I already gave the first top tip.
Yeah.
Follow what you're interested in, do what you're interested in. That's the most surefire way to grow. In terms of my path specifically, what I could probably also add is, don't be afraid to take some risks. Obviously, I left my Apple job. My original plan was to start a startup, and it quickly didn't work out. But at the time I left Apple, I didn't know that fractional CTO consulting was the thing that you can do. And I've actually really enjoyed doing it, and I've paid my bills for a number of years since leaving Apple. I'm doing a thing that I just didn't even know existed until I had the confidence to take that risk. So don't be afraid to take risks. Another thing that I've heard, this is going to give an age range. We're talking about age bias. I think this is more so about the phase you are in your career versus what age you are specifically. But some people say learn in your 20s, earn in your 30s. And what that means is if you're early on in your career, whether you're in your 20s or not, it's worth pursuing opportunities that will enable you to learn and grow over opportunities that will give you a short-term boost in pay or compensation or whatever, because it's that exponential curve. Most of your gains are going to be at the end of the curve. So don't worry about like making the tiny little difference at the beginning of the exponential curve. You want to set yourself up so that at the end, you get most of those gains from what you learned early.
Correct. Also, Jake, there is one more relevant question on the same side since we are speaking on that part. So Maheshwari is putting up a question. Can you explain about the fractional CTO role and how does that works?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting role. The gist of it is if someone is non-technical and they want to start a technical company, they need someone to help them do that. And my opinion and recommendation is always that they'd be best off finding a co-founder who is technical, just because of that ownership mindset and skin in the game. But the problem that folks have is, you have to convince someone like me or any of you on this call, right? Folks who have a fairly high income potential and bills to pay, to work for equity on a very uncertain project. And so there's kind of a shortage of that type of person available. And especially with the rise of remote work, fractional CTOs have become an increasingly popular solution where perhaps rather than just a non-technical person who doesn't know what they're doing, hiring a software dev agency, and God knows how many times I've seen that sort of arrangement blow up, they could hire someone like me who acts as a technical co-founder, but on a fractional basis. So not necessarily doing the same thing as a technical co-founder. A true technical co-founder should be building and writing your code. Whereas if someone retains my services, I can help you build by evaluating a range of options between, maybe it is hiring an agency. I would recommend that, if you need to get going right away, due to some deadline, and you need to make sure you find the right one. But to increase the ownership mindset, you can hire contractors, you can hire employees, and I would help facilitate that hiring, and then set the team processes and culture, and then depending on the arrangement and whether there's a project manager or not, either manage the project or just help out on the architecture side and do code review, which is nice because I get to review code and sometimes contribute code as well. If there's something I know how to do, I can help either pair with the engineers or open an explanatory pull request, or I can hop on the pull request and make some changes myself. So it's a cool thing. It's just very unstable is the risk. I'm feeling the same pressures that you all are. Honestly, just fortunately, I got on an Apple at the right time, so I've got some savings and I can weather the storm. But yeah, even in my seat, I've got one client right now, and they have runway until July. They just closed a big deal, so I'm thinking they might be able to raise. But it's if I lose that client, I gotta get some more in the funnel. So, but it's so far it's been worth it, just because of how cool the job is and how much flexibility I get.
All right, Jake. So there are two questions which are completely relevant to your Apple days back. So one question is from Kapil. So Kapil is asking, can you please share bit info on how you improve test tracking using ML and AI during your early Apple days? I'm not sure
This is where I want to be,
yeah.
because we almost wrote a paper about this thing that I worked on. So I don't want to divulge too much, but it's not even sophisticated techniques. I could probably talk about it more broadly. It's just, you could imagine that there's techniques for clustering vectorized text files based on the contents, of those files. So you've got some logs, could run clustering based on logs or a number of other features to attempt to determine which logs are similar and which logs are different. And so if you have a lot of text files that you need to go through on a regular basis, say every morning, it would be handy if machine learning could tell you which of these are most similar and which of these are most different. And that was one of the earlier and more impactful projects I got to work on, utilizing log data. But there's just a bunch of potential with that, especially inside companies that have a lot of it. Honestly, it was a really cool thing to get to work on and have access to. Another use case for it is bug reporting. Apple just has thousands and thousands and thousands of internal bug reports, and the vast majority of them have a lot of logs attached, and all of that history is tracked. So where was this bug originated? What team did it end up on? What was the resolution of the bug? And so you could also imagine building systems to predict what's going to happen to bugs or where they should go, based on a number of features, including log files.
All right. Jake, similar question from Ravi. I'll not take you down to your Apple days in that case. So let's say in general terms, if someone is transitioning from SQL to NoSQL databases, So, what are the some normal challenges that an organization or a particular individual used to face?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't lead that initiative.
Okay.
I was happy to be working on my machine learning stuff at the time, but I would have also loved to be able to say, like, yeah, I actually facilitated this transition. So the most important point that I can comment that I saw firsthand was just how we lost that level of flexibility in being able to query that system in a plethora of ways versus if you're using a database like Cassandra. You need to make sure that you have your data written in however many ways it needs to be written so that it can be queried according to whatever queries you need to run. And then any other queries that you need to run that don't deserve that level of attention. You got to run a Spark job or something like that, and that's tricky. So think about when and whether you need it. But in the case at Apple, I think they're even worse. Some people who are like, "This is overkill." Are we just doing this thing to be highly scalable, right? But we there was truly an enormous level of write throughput for these tasks, and there were performance issues, and I think it's kind of like that adoption of new things. There's always going to people who say, "Oh, why are we even doing this earlier on?" But by the time I left, it was like we went from that to like I said, microservice, full microservice architecture, like you would see at a public facing
All
SaaS
right.
company, a massive level of scale. And this was an internal tool, and I think our org was like between 60, maybe 90 people. I forget the time. So it like maybe a mid-sized startup, but it was not. Some could say, like, did we need microservices? Did we need to make this migration? Like, by the time I left, it was absolutely the case that we did, and it absolutely did have a measurable influence on the productivity of all of those teams working in that way and utilizing those systems.
All right. Moving on to the next part, Jake. So I have three questions which are relevant to getting into Apple. So I'm just combining them all. So probably if you could assist us, what are the different rounds, or probably I would say different step the organization used to follow when they are selecting an employee at Apple?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, Apple is different than some of the other tech companies. 90% sure they're still operating this way, where you pick the job that you want to apply to. So, I would say that is by and large the most important thing is be very smart about the jobs that you apply to. I think that they may even impose a limit. They may say, like, I forget what it is, but they don't want you to just apply to every single job on jobs.apple.com. So, really do your homework, and especially look for jobs that you think you have a chance at getting. If I had originally applied, like I said, to be on that iMessage team or to be on CoreOS, you might not be talking to me right now. I happened to apply for internal tools test infrastructure, and that specific WatchOS team needed someone like me. So I would say choose your job carefully, and then in terms of what does that process look like from there, it's going to be either a recruiter, I think, doing the first pass on those resumes, but then it's going to be your would-be manager, like the hiring manager for the team that you're going to be joining, is going to look at your resume and do that initial call. And so that's where, having done your homework on these particular roles and being able to engage with that person in an informed way would be key. And then, in my organization, it would be after you pass the hiring manager screen, there's usually like a very simple technical question they'll ask. Basically, at that phase, they're looking to see if you're lying on your resume, is what we said internally. They'll ask you that sort of question just to prove you've got some level of chops. And then be like a couple phone screens, I think between 2 or 3 phone screens with various engineers, and then a round of on-site interviews. And what were the other? Was there another part to that question, or I think
No. That's all I would say, because eventually the questions was related to it, whether there are some screening rounds and all. So I think you have already answered that. So on that note,
yeah,
Shiva has also asked a small question. So it's related to probably something like that. The question says, do you think AI and ML models can make use of blockchain tech?
I mean, I think I saw there's a specific startup that was like, we are the people that are doing machine learning and blockchain together. We're like the intersection
Oh,
of that.
nice.
That might have been the peak of the hype cycle where like they raised money just by saying that we have these two parallel tiers of expertise. It's a bit of a weird question. Like, I wonder if on the spot I can come up with a good analogy. It'd be like, do you see like wrenches and like pliers like being useful in the same context? It's like they're two tools, they serve different purposes, but for any use case where they both make sense, they could certainly be needed. I don't have on my radar like a particular intersection of interest between those two technologies where it's like this is just obviously going to be a huge opportunity, and sometimes I do see that sort of thing. But I certainly believe that there could be lots of intersections there that end up being interesting.
All right. Jake, so we are just about to end this up. But before doing that, I would also ask if any of the attendees want to speak or probably want to ask a particular question to Jake. Feel free to raise hand. I'll just allow you to speak. By then, for others, I'm just posting a small uh, poll, so you can just answer that. But rest others, feel free to raise your hand. I can allow you to speak with Jake. All right, so we have one of them. Just a second. So, Maheshwari, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So, Jake, you mentioned that there was some company or some framework that was exploring use of the common blockchain for social network. Could you name it?
Yeah, it's lens.xyz. I wonder if I can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Let me just make sure that's the lens.xyz. And I think Nader Davitt is one of the guys behind that. He does developer DAO. Super cool engineer, just to follow. Sometimes I have a whole list of inspiring engineers that are cool to check out, but he's one of them. One of the main guys behind it. You should also check out.
Sure, but I am not seeing anything on chat.
Maybe I just sent it to.
Just a second. Yeah. It is being sent.
I sent it to hosts and panelists and one person. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, got it.
All right. So next up, I am just allowing Frank to speak. So Frank, you can feel free to unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jake, for the great session. One question I have is, as you mentioned earlier, that it is quite different when you are writing the software with relate to the large language model nowadays compared to some of the software you were writing before. I'm wondering, could you share some details about what's the difference between like the software you are writing based on LLM and the software even before that? And also I appreciate you if you could share some details about what's the impact of the coming of the LLM could be. Could you see that is different from what we're doing before? Just for the scalable system. Thank you.
For sure. So it sounds like you were saying how have LLMs changed the way that I write software is kind of how I interpreted that.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So I make extensive use of LLMs. I was coding a little project today, and I presently am using the Cursor IDE. That's cursor.sh, which is pretty nifty. They've got it's basically a fork of VS Code that has language model support built in. So it has a number of nifty features. It'll let you do like retrieval augmented generation on your code base, and it'll let you do Command K, and it'll actually give you a diff. So I use Cursor a lot, although it's difficult because I find OpenAI, they've got all of the final layer of fine tuning, and RLHF, theirs is the best. So sometimes just talking to ChatGPT ends up being the way to go, and I was doing that a lot today. Like I said, I use it. I put a lot of faith in it. Some people adopt the mindset of, use your brain first anytime you get a bug instead of using ChatGPT. For me, if it's like a simple bug, I will very frequently just see if the language model can solve it. Cursor actually has a AI agent that will attempt to debug your code. So I'll save myself some brain cycles and see if the AI can do it before I start to think about it, which is something people are afraid to do. But the downside is, like, I was working on this today. You can like build an app using an LLM, and it will get it mostly right. And then eventually, as the requirements and the complexities grow, it gets to a point where it stops being able to keep up with all of your demands of it at once. It's like, I started asking it to like add or change a thing, and then it forgot about some other thing that I asked it to do. And at that point, you just can't rely on it to say rewrite this whole file, right? If you do that, it's gonna lose some important bits of your file. My solution working on that today was to ask it to actually refactor the code. That's something you can ask it to do. And if you have tests, like I said, this is even better, where it was like, okay, I've trusted this AI to write this giant file for me. Now I need to understand it myself at a deeper level, even though AI wrote most of the code. So I'm going to tell it, make this code as readable as possible. And then now my human brain switches in. And that was a process I went through today. I was just talking to the model, and it was rewriting the whole file for me. And at some point it switched to now this is my code, and I'll have the AI write little diffs here and there, but I'm mostly using my human brain. So you have to kind of switch between those modes is something I've been trying to manage, and it's tricky.
Yeah, thanks, Jake, for sharing.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Frank, coming and speaking with Jake. So Jake, before we just end up this session, so I would just like to put up a small question. So if the people who have stayed until now over here, so Jake, can you just allow us or probably share any resource or any book which the attendee should follow in terms of they can just enhance their scalability skills?
Yeah, hopefully you all know it already, but Designing Data-Intensive Applications was easily the most influential one for me. Just absolute treasure trove of knowledge in that book. And then any of the subjects that it mentions, you could just Google, find whatever the best book is on that particular subject. If you're learning about databases or write-ahead logs or things like that, right? You could do further reading beyond what the book says, and just based off the content in that book alone, I think you could build a solid knowledge. It's called Designing Data-Intensive Applications. I'll drop that in the chat too, and it is a formative text for the field. Someone said, have a Zoom set up. Oh yeah, 757 build weekend, it already happened. I don't know if there's a recording of the Zoom, but yeah, it was cool as a hackathon that I ran. I guess somebody was looking at my LinkedIn. But yeah, it already happened, sadly.
All right. So probably, Jake, if you allow me, like one of Tony also want to speak. So if time permits, can we? All right.
I have time, yeah.
All right. So Tony, I'm just allowing you to speak. Just a second. Yeah. So feel free to unmute and go ahead, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. So you went back, you had mentioned when you were using the model that you kind of had to go back and forth between um, using the model and then thinking about it, then using the model. It sounds like, in a sense, that, and the way I've been using ChatGPT and doing other things, is that I've been using it as a way of providing suggestions of how to attack a problem and all. And then being able to use the critical thinking of like, okay, yep, no, that's good idea. Nope, that's not good idea. Let me go with that route or that route. It ends up giving me ideas. Do you see that that is the format of where AI is going? It's giving us suggestions versus just, all right, go and do that. And then we just take whatever that is and plug it in.
I think both, but I think that I could see the human brains more so utilizing suggestions and or offering the suggestions as opposed to the go and do the thing. Because at least as it stands right now, language models, have access to the corpus of knowledge they were trained on the internet. But a lot of humans have niche areas of expertise that require more than the AI has a context window for to understand. So my experience is that if you're building software in some particular niche, ChatGPT might not know all the ins and outs of it, and you really would be best served to talk to an expert in that niche to come up with the best design. But then when it comes to execution, actually writing the code, that's where there's so many parts of writing code where I'm just like, please, I wish the AI would do this. Like, I don't want to have to think about authentication ever again, or all the different ways you can do it, or database migrations, or so many things that we still have to deal with that are just a massive pain in the butt. I am looking forward to the day that I can just tell an AI and it will do it 100% of the time. And there'll always be, then you solve the more interesting problems, right? There's always some most interesting problem in your code base, and that's probably the one that the AI is not going to know how to do, and that's what your brain's best suited for, anyways.
I'm kind of curious, and just kind of being a devil's advocate and all with it, is that there's been times in the past where there's been certain technologies. Oh wow, let's do case tools. If I'm just able to WYSIWYG the whole thing, or basically build out a graphics, and then it will go ahead and generate the code and do the code that we want it to do. Do you think AI will kind of bridge that gap and no longer have that?
What was the example technology you gave? I feel like that's an important piece. I did not familiar with it.
So a while back, there were some aspects with regards to case tools where I'm trying to remember. Sorry, where we were able to. Oracle was coming up with some stuff where you were able to basically plug and play and put different widgets for a particular screen or for a particular database or things like that, and then it would automatically generate the code and all behind the scenes. It never got to the point where you could just easily create the code and don't have. Basically, the idea was a layman or somebody with a business analyst kind of aspects could generate code.
I think I have a better sense of your question. The answer is that I don't know, but I hope that it does. What I can say from a historical perspective is there's been so many times over my career where there's been a boogeyman that was going to take our jobs, right? And at one point it was low code, no code, and sort of tools that you're describing, right? And it always ends up being that software engineers end up finding better stuff to do. At one point, software engineers got paid to make static websites, and then Squarespace came around, and now no engineer wants to make a static website. It's just not fun anymore, I think that trend is going to continue to play out, but if I knew the answer to your question, I would go build it and make a bunch of money, because I don't. It's like, that's a great startup idea. If you can figure out how to make an AI successfully build most SaaS, without having to deal with the problems I just talked about, which is, you know,
Right.
like the whole app I was building today, right? Like I would have loved if it just coded the whole thing for me, but it couldn't. You know, I had to start using my brain again. Like I
Right.
hope we can solve problems, and I'm optimistic if we do, it'll be a good thing for software engineers.
Well, but I think I see your trend in the sense of that, you know, some of the basic stuff that has been really automate, what am I trying, what's the word? Has been automated already and all. I mean, honestly, in the 1960s and 1970s, people were still writing C and still writing assemblies. We don't have
Yeah,
that
but
many
that's what I think
anymore.
that trend's going to continue to play out. I mean, I feel like you're proving the point. It was like, yeah, back then, you know, people were writing assembly, you know, or I
Right.
think at some point even been writing binary when they were like programming these computers. That level of abstraction, I believe, is going to continue to raise, and language models
Right.
are going to facilitate. But it remains to be seen how. You know, maybe tools like Cursor is one of the ways, but.
Right. Right.
But
I mean, in the sense of
I wouldn't take the perspective of all of the easy things have already been automated, and it's not going to continue to happen. Someone's
Right.
going to figure it out, but don't be afraid of it. It's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, because then we'll just go on expanding onto that in the sense of, okay, now I don't have to worry about these minutia pieces. I can go ahead and look at
Yeah.
a bigger problem that I'm trying to solve, or bigger pieces that I'm trying to solve, and all.
Exactly.
Gotcha. The game's going to continue, in a sense.
All right. I can see one more hand coming up, but Justin, for now, we just need to go off because it's already, we are 15, 20 minutes beyond the time we have been committed up. But anyways, Justin, so we'll continue this thread. You can probably keep your questions in your mind, and I'll be soon going to open up a thread in the alumni Discord server itself. So you can post their question over there as well. We'll be happy to answer that too. So Jake, on that note, I would, with your permission, I would also, just last time I would like to ask all the attendees whether you have attended the community poll or not. If not, please do that. Else, you can connect with Jake. Jake has shared the profile on LinkedIn. With your permission also, Jake, I would like to include you in our alumni Discord server.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. So I'll just connect you back and get your Discord ID and add you in the server. So on that note, I would take your permission and probably on behalf of the attendees, on behalf of IK, I would like to thank you for making up this session. This was really great to interact with you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Sure. All right. Thanks, audience. Thanks for coming up. Soon, I think we'll be bringing up the next session with some of the great coaches like Jay. So until then, stay tuned. Have a great day ahead. Thanks, Jake. Bye-bye.
Take care.